and I have the honor to introduce Henrike Schmidt. Good morning, Henrike. Henrike Schmidt, who's going to deliver the first talk, is a private lecturer at the Peter Sondy Institute of Comparative Literature at FU Berlin. She is doing research in digital and network culture and their significance for the societies of East and Central Europe. She is in Russian and Bulgarian literature in particular, and has just finished a book titled Anthology Games, Inventing the Canon, and that will be published in, well, this year, still in autumn. So, Henrike, we are very much looking forward to your lecture today. Henrike, are you there?
Oh, hello, I see you. I am there, yes, okay. I am there.
Would you start right away, because I already introduced you?
Yes, I think that makes sense as we changed the presentation, and it's a direct follow-up to the paper presented by ASTRA. And so let me start the presentation. So I will bring us from the early 20th century to closer to our today's times. And I start, hopefully, with the play by the Austrian dramatist, prose writer, and theatre scholar Ferdinand Schmalz with the programmatic title Thermal Resistance, which was premiered in the 2016-2017 season at the Schauspielhaus Zürich. Of all things, the good old spa, about which we heard so much in the presentation by Astrid, which in contemporary literature usually is reflected as an object of nostalgic reflection or cultural criticism in the sense of being an elitist or escapist space, is to become a cell of resistance against contemporary body cult and neoliberal practices of self-optimization. So we can already see that we quite move from a different register of disciplinary society to the field of self-optimization. And I would like to use a quote. Then the spa becomes the place of a reappropriation of the body, of an uninstrumental, not functioning body, like a broken cogwheel in the gear of the beauty industry. In this structurally separate, segregated space, a new body image. No, it is not an image. It is an actual body that can be cultivated here. I thank Robert Gillett for the translations of the quotes from Thermal Resistance, which give the text and the author their appropriate appearance. And I ask for your indulgence that I myself have not self-optimized my English presentation linguistically to the last, a small tribute that has to be paid to the dominance of English as a scientific language. Hopefully, it will not harm the understanding of the main thesis of my presentation. But back to the thermal resistance. The following characters appear in this play. Hans, the anarchist lifeguard with a class struggle attitude. Roswitha, the spa manager who is looking for the new investor for the purpose of revitalizing the spa. Marie, who visits the spa as such an investor and combats her own stress symptoms with manic apnea diving. Other personnel, such as the second lifeguard, Walter, who maintains an affair with the manageress, and Leon, the masseur, who gets caught between the fronts. Last but not least, the spa society itself is present in its bathing suits while performing speeches in the form of an antique chorus. As a counterpart to the spa in the traditional sense, as Astrid has conveyed it to us in her talk, the rampant wellness trend is ironized in the increasingly absurd treatments that the bathers must offer in order to presumably inspire its new clientele. Alpine wrap Swiss deluxe, for example, or a Java Lulu ritual, or a mare milk Thalasso treatment. These treatment methods and therapies are stylized into grand metaphors of the current cultural or social condition, like the famous horizontal way of life in Thomas Mann's Zauberberg. And I would like to give one example from a dialogue between Hannes the lifeguard and Leon the massage. I no longer trust our comfortable ease, Leon, then perhaps this palace of wellness is not the right place for you. Hannes, this is exactly where you have to start in this hell of complacency. The classic dichotomy of the spa between paradise and hell reverberates here, alluding to its ambivalent heterotopian nature, as once again exemplified in the talk by Astrid Köhler earlier this morning. But from this palace of wellness, which is a hell of complacency, there is no escape in its sedating embrace. I must confess that I snuck back the term wellness into Robert's translation, who noted that the word doesn't exist in English, which is, of course, an interesting finding in and of itself. The language of the play Thermal Resistance, in addition to its striking metaphors, is that of the corny joke, and thus very difficult to translate. Schmalz derives veritable swarms of neologisms from the concept of cure and wellness and their natural elements of water and warmth. In the course of the plot, Hannes forms a resistance cell in the service areas of the spa against the aforementioned attempts to turn the spa into a wellness temple and a fun pool. This leads in consequence to the apocalypse in the water. The entrances of the bath are blocked, the water pipes break, the saunas explode. If you read and watch contemporary spa texts or performances, what my colleague Astrid and Köhler and I do excessively in order to go beyond this golden era of the European spa between the late 18th and the early 20th century, one quickly notices that the phenomenon of wellness is ubiquitous. The contemporary spa seems to be no longer thinkable or imageable without it. I will later discuss some texts by Croatian language author Dubravka Ugrešić. Further works that could be mentioned in this context are Bad Regina by David Schalko, as well an Austrian author, or Sanatorium and Crib Casino by the English performance artist Abi Palmer. A good reason to take a closer look at the term in its tension relationship to the traditional cure. A Cure for Wellness is the name of the trash horror film by director Gore Verbinski, launched as well in 2017. It has an exhausted financial manager from New York travel to the Swiss mountains, an open allusion to the famous Magic Mountain. As stereotypical as the plot is, as ambiguous is the title, which already suggests that the actual cure could lie in turning away from the belief in wellness. In the context of my considerations today, however, it should rather read a cure for the spa, for the traditional spa as an architectural ensemble and medical cultural phenomenon, has come under pressure from two sides in the late 20th century. Financially, through the reforms of European healthcare systems, and conceptually, through the shift of healthcare from the realm of the social to that of the private, to self-care through fitness, mindfulness, and nutrition. This crisis manifests itself in the term spa, which is, as well known, first denoted the Belgian spa of the same name, and then approximately from the end of the 17th century, developed into a generic designation of the phenomenon in the English-speaking world and beyond. Since about the last third of the 20th century, it has undergone a renewed shift and no longer primarily refers to the health resort as a specific place of naturally based healing and prophylaxis, as well as of social interaction, but rather to a placeless, dislocated service, physical treatments to enhance well-being performed by not necessarily medically trained personnel. Along the way, it leaves the English-speaking world and infiltrates languages around the globe. Spa and wellness are not congruent, but closely related to each other, the first as a space or treatment, the second as an effect or condition. Contrary to what is often assumed, the term wellness is not of contemporary origin, no fusion of the terms well-being and fitness, as tempting this may be. Rather, it emerges at about the same time as that of spa, at least according to Pamela Heiser. She looked it up in the Oxford English Dictionary, where it is first listed for the year 1645. It explains it as a state of well-being or good health. Its modern career, however, starts in the 1950s and 60s in the United States, again, according to Heiser, as part of the emerging preventive medical movement, Präventivmedizinische Bewegung. The concept of wellness, spearheaded by Halbert L. Dunn, and now I cite Minas Dimitriou, emphasized the principle of self-responsibility for individual physical and mental health. High-level wellness is the term coined by Dunn himself. It's, by the way, surprising that the other ways, not overly modest representatives of today's wellness movement, have even linguistically downsized the original term to only wellness. Dunn, incidentally, was a health statistician and was looking for a formula to empirically measure the effects of his new doctrine of preventive healthcare. And here we have a correlation to the talk by Astrid. Minas Dimitriou emphasizes that this early concept of wellness was, in her words, absolutely innovative, both in terms of scientific theory and health policy, because it involved a departure from, again, I quote, the traditional pathogenetically oriented healthcare system of the United States, end quote. Dunn was concerned, by the way, with increasing physical and mental health for both man and society, contrary to today's perception and criticism of wellness as only individualistic and latently asocial. The connection of the term wellness to overall societal health gets lost with the increasing emphasis on the pole of individual responsibility for personal health and becomes more and more a lifestyle and social distinction feature. The organization theorists Sederström and Spicer condensed this development in the term of the wellness syndrome as a complementary development to professional and private self-optimization. And as you can see from the quote, they qualify the wellness movement as an ideology and as a moral imperative. The body philosophical foundations that accompany these developments are those of Foucauldian biopolitics in the interplay of disciplinary society on the one hand and technologies of the selves on the other, that are increasingly digitally based via self-tracking apps and gadgets that measure and stimulate physical activities. But before I explore this aspect further, a few words nevertheless about COVID-19, as the pandemic is changing the SPA as an institution of European healthcare. We compiled a non-representative COVID-19 bulletin for our associated partners, practitioners in the field of the SPAs for our European SPA project, in which we evaluated social media portals on the topic. Among other things, 3 trends emerged that I would like to briefly outline here. First, in view of fear of infections and the following increased health awareness, Italian architect Matteo Fantun, who specializes in hospital and spa architecture, accentuates, I cite, a shift toward wellness spaces that evoke mindfulness through solitude and self-contemplation, end quote, rather than through exchange and socializing in the traditional spa type as a, if distorted, public space. But the latter ones seized their chance too after decades of the health political cuts and advertised for a return to state-financed ambulatory precaution measures, particularly to the less well-off classes. And a remarkable result for Germany is since the summer 2021 that stationary prevention measures in stately recognized health resorts are again compulsory services to be paid for by the health insurance systems. Third, and finally, we see tendencies towards merging of the cure in the sense of medical practice and wellness in the sense of mindfulness practices. Medical wellness is a term which pops up and a rather oxymoronic shortcut for these developments. Returning to biopolitics, so we have heard from ASTRA as well that decisive for the study of the SPA of whatever national provenance is the concept of the disciplinary society as developed and exemplified by Michel Foucault, as well as his concept of the heterotopia. Fundamental to this concept is the idea of positive repression, that is, the regulation and modulation of the body through the enactment of scientifically based medical and mental care. Through the enlightened accumulation of knowledge and the humanitarian public health engagement, the individual body is nonetheless subordinated to official biopolitics enforced by state institutions. The SPA and Sanatorium, to sum it up once again, are places of body politics per se, as they implement norms concerning the healthy individual and the societal body by practicing a strict regimen of time, space, and movement, as we once again have seen, for example, in Cloche-Merle. Towards the end of the 20th century, and accompanied by altering economic and technological conditions, French philosopher Gilles Deleuze formulates a paradigm change from Foucault's disciplinary society to a society of control. In his postscript on the societies of control from 1992, he argues that the society and the individual are no longer disciplined by central institutions. Dr. Suffolk in his Watching Tower, central institutions from prison to sanatorium, but that the control mechanisms are decentralized, outsourced to the individual itself in order to cut expenditure, relying on the ubiquitous digital technologies, constantly supervising work-life balances, physical appearance and performance, and using smartwatches and live logging technologies, as Cederström and Spicer would add. Many will know this postscript, but you can never quote the classics enough. So here we go. These are the societies of control, which are in the process of replacing the disciplinary societies. There's no need to ask which is the toughest or most tolerable regime, for it's within each of them that liberating and enslaving forces confront one another. For example, in the crisis of the hospital as environment of enclosure, neighborhood clinics, hospices, and daycare could at first express new freedom, but they could participate as well in the mechanisms of control that are equal to the harshest of confinements. Spaces of enclosure are supplemented by modular systems and perpetual self-optimization processes. Deleuze talks about training. For the medical field, this is how it looks like in the words of Deleuze. For the hospital system, the new medicine without doctor or patient that singles out potential sick people and subjects at risk, which in no way attests to individuation, as they say, but substitutes for the individual or numerical body the code of a individual material to be controlled. The photograph on the slide shows a Polaroid frame for selfies on the pier in the Polish seaside resort of Sopot, as they are used today to independently document one's presence at a resort or elsewhere via social media without the need of being inscribed into any guest lists or documents, once again, if we compare it to Clochemere. In addition to critical or even dystopian applications and interpretations of such life logging and self-control technologies, they can also have emancipative usages in the sense that they free chronically ill people from constant care by the medical authorities, as underlines, for example, Klüver. But let me come to another example from literature. Dubravka Ugryshic's novel Baba Yaga Laid an Egg, published in Croatian in 2008 and in English translation in 2010, explores, to my mind, the sketch dialectics between self-optimization and people burning out as diagnosed by sociologists Cederström and Spicer, which leads to the need to relax, as one of her fictional characters, the massager Mevludin, a refugee of Bosnian origin in a Czech spa town, would say in his South Slavic Creole. Dubravka Ugryšić is a post-Yugoslav writer and Slavic scholar specialized in Russian literature and currently based in Amsterdam. Her work covers novels, short stories, and political essays, including writings on the Yugoslav wars in the 1990s. Her political engagement with and criticism of both Serbian and Croatian nationalism led to her leaving Croatia in 1993, and to put it in her own terms, since then exile has turned into emigration. In her novel Baba Yaga Laid an Egg, a motley party assembles in a Czech health resort in post-socialist times. 3 old ladies from Croatia intending to spend a wellness holiday in the traditional spa town. A young Bosnian physiotherapist, a refugee from the Yugoslav wars, offering massages disguised as a Turk. An American businessman with a telling name, Mr. Sheikh, who wants to give his business a fresh impulse by selling health products in the new old world. Some new Russian businessmen reoccupying the Czech provinces, not with tanks, but with money. The 3 aging women provoke the sanatorium's order. They are not ill, but old. They do not want to self-optimize, but to enjoy the last pleasures in their lives, potentially sexual ones included among them. The triad stumbles awkwardly through a variety of luxurious scenarios, rather unwillingly enjoying stunning wellness applications like those we have got to know already from Ferdinand Schmelz's thermal resistance. For example, sweet dreams, a bath in hot chocolate, or Turkish delight. Ugrishic's spa novel, thus quite typically for the genre, is a satirical account of the sometimes amusing, sometimes heartbreaking endeavors of the individual on its quest for health and beauty. The three women witches are surrounded by male characters typical for the spa setting, among them of importance for us today, the spa doctor and the American investor businessman, Mr. Shake. The spa doctor, Mr. Topolanek, embodies the change from the old court to the new wellness business. Topolanek is a physician-philosopher trying to metaphysically pimp up his rather absurd business ideas, as, for example, the launch of a beer bubble bath. He gives lectures on topics of longevity and self-enhancement, reaching from antiquity to today's self-optimizing technology. These pseudo-philosophical expeditions allow the narrator to address straight away issues of contemporary body politics. Thus, in his lectures, Topolanek talks in detail about the Soviet experiments to create the new man and to defeat death.
Sorry?
Is this helpful?
Excuse me?
Yes. Yes.
Something happened?
It was good. It was very good. Yes. And this is very good too. Except it seems to have frozen.
Excuse me, are there any technical problems?
Well, there were some voices, but I don't know where it comes from. Sorry very much. We're just having a look at it now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Shall I wait for a moment?
You're fine now. You just try to continue if you are not too much irritated. I hope that the voices will just.
No, that's no.
We
that's
hear
no
you
problem.
very well. We hear you very well.
I was imagining that I'm running out of time and somebody wants to remind me about that. This is why I was a bit stressed.
You have about 5 minutes still.
Okay, yeah, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Juxtaposed with Mr. Topolanek is Mr. Shake, the American businessman who represents, and I cite, those numerous prophets, swindlers, and designers of our lives in whose powers we choose to place ourselves. His nutrition drinks are an ersatz for the magical procedures of ancient times, and he sells the hot air of metamorphosis in an era in which, in the absence of all ideologies, the only refuge that remains for the human imagination is the body. So I think this is an interesting quote, and I suppose Cederström and Spicer, from the point of view of their wellness syndrome, would argue that the body is the ideology. The misshaped, grotesque bodies of the post-communist Eastern European subjects seem predestined to be victims of Mr. Shake and the likes. Once again, a citation: to drive the Easterners stodgy with beer, yellow with smoking, and bloated with alcohol to reshape their bodies from what had been commercially incompatible to what was compatible. The positioning of the body as the last territory of individual control echoes the shift from Foucault to Deleuze, from disciplinary society to society of control. But Ugrishic's reading also contains a more positive connotation, with control being removed from the state and handed over to the individual. In her 2019 Croatian photo essay, There's Nothing Here, to Nema Ničega, Ugrishic changes scene and genre. Here, the author examines the cultural and political significance of spas in the post-Yugoslav era. The essay is illustrated with photographs by Davor Konjukicic, which express the decay aesthetics, or more bluntly, ruin porn, popular today among professional and amateur photographers. The text was published in English translation in 2020 in her essay collection with the body political title, The Age of Skin. As an anthropologist at the edge of the pool, Ugrešić here widens her gaze from the individual body to the collective body of the European continent. And I cite, "Why do I find myself drawn to hot springs? I enjoy playing the anthropologist on a clandestine mission. I watch the subtle flow of people and money where one least expects or notices it. Under the roofs of spas, the old communist utopia, the dream of highly professional, well-lit and modern sanatoriums for all, stagnates and mingles with a dose of post-communist human despair, along with mildew festering on the tiles and the yellowed hydromassage baths." She maps the flows of water, people and money, but also of services of the modularized control society. And this is what reminds me of Deleuze's postscript when I read her works. Now she does it no longer in the mode of the fictional, but of the autobiographical. People in the know have realized that survival in Croatia, but also anywhere else in the world, lies in offering services. The whole world is connected by a single activity, the exchange of services. Most of us are servicing one another. Women and men working as dentists, hairstylists, pedicurists, cosmeticians, plastic surgeons, personal trainers, masseuses, therapists, wait staff, hotel staff, sex industry workers, and many others. They are globally interlinked and networked. They are all givers and receivers of services. Almost reads like a poem in this kind of enumeration of services. The resulting health map of Europe shows the geopolitical imbalances because the flows of wellness migration are inverse. Patients travel from rich to poor countries, the staff from the periphery to the center. And this is how Dubravka Ugrešić sums it up. Post-communist Europe sees itself as a swanky wellness center catering to the rich. Ugrešić deliberately palimpsest, this is her own term, these health tourism dynamics with recent migration flows and contrasts the spas with the refugee camps. Concluding, in Schmalz's play, as in Ugrešić's writing, the concept of wellness can be read as a meta-metaphor for European society, which in the face of a global and domestic crisis entrenches itself in its resorts. Interestingly, it replaces the wellness metaphor, the spa or the kurort, as an insignia for a decadent European society, as it was developed by Thomas Mann in his Magic Mountain or by Fyodor Dostoevsky in his Roulettenburg Interventions. By doing so, it's only two texts, but I suppose it's nevertheless a sign, a diagnosis. By doing so, they express a certain nostalgia, a paradoxical longing for the earlier regulated mechanisms of inclusion and exclusion, if we think of Cloche-Merle-Lebas. This is partly not without irony, specifically with regard to the digital self-optimization techniques, which are mostly met with rejection. After all, the historic spa in its golden age sought to excel and precisely through its modernity, the latest technologies and treatment methods had to be implemented in a timely manner. The two authors who I would say are representative for other texts diagnose a profound cultural change in the realm of European body politics, using the example and the setting of the health resort, namely the move from a disciplinary to a control society. But it's not the idea of such a schematic change from one model to the other oversimplifying, as are partly the literary plots themselves. And indeed, the contemporary spa is characterized by a hybrid appearance, by the infiltration of its architectural body with wellness cells, so to say, further enhanced by the post-pandemic dynamics, the keyword of medical wellness. Ugrešić characterizes the endeavor of her own spa anthropology as an attempt to process this tangle of meanings, staring at the global eudaimonic well-being map on my laptop, which is really close to the agenda of the European Spa Project, or at least my share in it. The Deleuzian diagnosis of a paradigm shift from disciplinary to control society is helpful for this, albeit having in mind that, once again, citing Deleuze, it's within each of them, disciplinary or control society, it's within each of them that the liberating and enslaving forces confront one another. Thank you.
Much, Henrike, for this great focus on wellness in the frame of our conference here. You gave me some really good thoughts, so that I'm really I don't feel in the position to find a question myself right now. So I hope that there are others who are already ready with their questions.
Yeah, maybe a very general question. Thank you very much, Henrike. You gave us lots of interesting and relevant examples. And of course, indirectly, you spoke about what I'm going to ask as well. But I was wondering, how does it really play out? It seems that the places for wellness, spas and all of that lend themselves particularly to these kind of horror scenarios. Yeah, so there's idea of horror, idea of a reversal of the idea of wellness. Do you have an explanation beyond what I just said for this tendency that there's some horror in that, or control, or whatever, totalitarianism?
Okay, so I have to return first of all for a second the question. So you are talking about the cultural representations or about the horror happening in the spas themselves on the ground with wellness infiltrating the spa town?
Well, I wouldn't be able to judge what is really happening. Yeah, I'm talking about the representations.
Okay, it's the same with me. And of course, it's too big a field if we take a look at the ground, what's happening at the spas. Although I have to add that within our project, we cooperate with associated partners, a group of musicians in spas and spa associations, and so this gives us quite a lot of feedback what is going on. And for example, we witnessed that in some of the spa associations there really is an anxiety concerning this spa and wellness industries and how fast this endangers, so to say, the cultural heritage of the traditional spa towns. So evidently there are really tensions. Concerning the cultural representations, so it's just that I started to take a look on this wellness topic because, as said, if we take a look at contemporary spa novels, wellness is everywhere. The horror, for the time being, I would say, still stems from the memory of the traditional spa, or rather sanatorium text of the 19th century, especially what we call the sanatorial narrative emerging at the beginning of the 20th century, when in turn with this medicalization, we have a different type of building with the sanatoria, even more enclosed than the spaces of the spa, and with a very archetypical architecture with the long corridors, with the rooms, with the doors closing and opening. So if, for example, you take a look at the Cure for Wellness by Gore Verbinski, so this idea of these uncanny spaces is still very present. And then the new wellness discourses are somehow presented like the glamorous surfaces hiding the still maybe totalitarian, or maybe that's too too strict a term. Maybe it's rather indeed the idea of control and manipulation of the body. So to sum it up, once again, I think the wellness discourse in these representations is still very much inspired by the fears instigated by this control of the Sanatorium text, and the glamorous appearances somehow seem to hide the deeper nature of this phenomenon.
Yeah. Well, may I add what I just thought? I think it's the horror can be explained also by the kind of cynicism that is covered by the wellness. So I'm a sinologist, Chinese studies guy. So we in sinology we often use the term wellness semantics when we talk about the rhetorics of the Communist Party of China. So and in that context, wellness semantics means that you have a way of speaking that gives those who listen the feeling that everything is going very well, is meant very well, is very inclusive, and in fact it just covers the fact of the undisputable power of the Communist Party of China that cannot be questioned at all. So maybe that is also one aspect of it. But that just was a comment. Are there still questions pointing to other problems? Yes, Tim.
So I guess I have maybe two thoughts. The first is just, it's a question which is, I'm wondering, given the emphasis in the last text about the post-apocalypse, I mean, what comes after wellness? Sort of, what's the future after this moment that we're living, and what's the future of the spa? What comes after post-control, or society, post-society, in a Deleuzean sense, I guess. And the second is, I like spas, honestly. I really do. And I'm not going to be embarrassed by saying that. There's a real attraction. I'm being a little facetious, but there's a real attraction, right, to spas. And I was thinking, you mentioned Deleuze, there's this other, insight of his about institutions meeting kind of desires. So it's never just institutions that are negative, it's institutions that meet, that can offer a kind of satisfaction. If they weren't offering a satisfaction, then they wouldn't have been instituted, is kind of the idea. So I guess that maybe ties into the first question. So if you read it that way, then what's the satisfaction that these spas today are meeting? And it sounds like it might be this kind of self-optimization, kind of being inscribed in this entrepreneurial, neoliberal moment. But I'm just really curious to hear your thoughts on what sort of how you see this playing out.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. I start with the attractiveness of the spa, which of course I have to admit the team shares, and I like to share that as an anecdote very often at conferences, that we sometimes even have been criticized in the sense of we have invented this research project in order to be able to go to the spas, and that's of course not true, although we do go to the spas. But now in a more serious note, I think what is interesting concerning the spa and the spa town, specifically concerning biopolitics, is its heterotopian nature. And so it's no incident that almost everyone today in the spa community uses this concept, and it's not at all outdated, because it's in a bigger space. So we can see all the things happening in Clochemerle, and Clochemerle, even though the control factor is evolving and maybe gets out of control, it is still a place of pleasure. And I think this is the fascination. It's a place of pleasure, and it's a place of norm transgression as well. It's norm implementation, and it's at the same time norm transgression. And this is why, on the one hand, Foucault's and Deleuze approaches apply very well, and on the other hand, the SPA somehow submerges and does not really fit into it. And this is what makes it interesting. Concerning the post-apocalypse or the thoughts, so this is of course rather speculative. I come from, if I take a look once again at the cultural representations, I can clearly, what I can say is that I can clearly see that the traditional SPA is the Heterotopia. It's the better place. It's an ideal, and this is in a way irritating, as I said, because it has its of course its disadvantages and control regimes as well. And there's a strong negative attitude towards wellness, which is somehow reflected in sociology, although, as I tried to underline, in sociology this is not so unanonymously this attitude, because wellness of course may have as well self-empowering aspects, which to my knowledge are not really reflected in this contemporary SPA settings. It's rather satirical or anti-utopian mode. So starting from that, and more going into what I have monitored on the social media portals concerning the post the COVID pandemic, I even see there is a chance for a revitalization for the SPA, which has to do with the heightened awareness of public health. Yesterday in the discussions, there was some argument the state is returning. This is once again ambiguous. On the one hand, it's more control. On the other hand, it's a return from privatization. This is something I suppose we can see in the SPAs, and the example from Germany somehow underlines this, that cures are paid for again. So this has been dismissed in the 1990s, and now it's coming back. It was planned longer before, but the pandemic somehow stimulated it. On the other hand, I suppose medical wellness has come to stay. Oh, sorry, somebody's calling me on the phone. Supposedly to add some words to my my speculations. So medical wellness, I think, is come to stay, and we're going to see hybrid phenomena. For sure, we're going to have yoga sessions at the beach and mindfulness in the bars. So I think, oh my God, I'm sorry. So yes, I'll stop with that.
Anyway, thank you so much for having been with us. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, and hope to see you again on another occasion. Thank you. We're going to have a break now.